I'm going to give you sort of explanation of what I want out of today. And then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation. You'll see. Okay, to begin with, the whole point to today, and I understand some of you may not be super thrilled with having to be here. Papers are due this week. So it's kind of, I mean, there's not, oh, yeah, kind of have to have class, right? So it's peer review day. If you've submitted a rough draft, turn it in. We'll automatically, some robot somewhere will spit out somebody's draft for you. You have a couple peer review questions that you can apply to their paper. That's pretty standard. Also pretty standard, I have emailed the peer review questions to you in the event that you haven't turned in a rough draft, which means you can't see the peer review. And you have some options there. You can, A, trade with somebody and still do the peer review, right? And or B, you can apply these questions to your own draft, which I think actually, oh shit. Oh, hi there. Which is actually a good idea. I happen to think the questions are pretty helpful, and if nothing else, applying them to your own work would be a good thing to do, okay? To that end, I want to talk about them very briefly. There's always four. Number one, have they provided context to understand whatever argument they're making about their primary text? Basically, this concerns that very first section we talked about in the introduction that's a little bit different for this paper. 2 to 3 sentences, what happened, 2 to 3 sentences, the response. That's a lot of pressure on a handful of sentences. So another way to frame this question is, based upon what they give you in their paper, do you feel like this is enough to really understand what you need to understand for them to make whatever argument they're going to make? You see what I'm saying? This will work best if it's a text you're less familiar with. So pretty much all the things you guys said for this paper, I've never heard of any of it because we live in different worlds. But do you feel like someone who didn't know about Ned Fulmer, I think was his name, anybody like that, like when you're reading their paper, you're like, this is, I understand what we're focused on in this first section. That's what that question's about. Number 2, do they actually have an argument that addresses the prompt? Do they avoid the pitfalls we've outlined this semester? Primarily, I say this semester, and there's a couple things there, but primarily what I'm talking about here is the big trap in this paper, which is it's not our job to respond. It's not our job to respond to the primary text. If you recall, our argument is about the response itself. So however people reacted to, we keep talking about Kanye, he's in the Twitter news again for things. But in that particular example, I would imagine most of us feel like he shouldn't have said those things, which is pretty standard for Kanye. But that's not what we're doing in the paper, right? What we're doing is, well, that seemed to be the general response. And actually this time, at least right now, it seems like the response is a little stronger than normal. It seems like he was a little caught off guard by people being like, you know what? Maybe this is enough, man. So our argument is, well, what does that response say about us as a people, a society, a culture here in 2022? That response says something about our values, our priorities as a society, right? That's our argument. The other pitfalls from the semester you want to watch out for: no should statements or anything close to that. Kanye should not have said what he said. No shit, right? To the best of your ability, you got to avoid that stuff. My recommendation would be, when it comes to your paper, draft however you draft, but then sometimes you got to go back hunting. Do I make any should statements? Do I make any recommendations? Do I say what someone ought to have done? If so, you got to lose it, okay? Number 3, are they avoiding summary in their body paragraphs, sticking almost exclusively to analysis? Now, I want to define this very carefully. I'm not saying you can't have any information in your body paragraphs. That's context. You need some, right? But here again, especially in this paper, you can fall into this trap where you write me a book report, where an entire body paragraph, more or less, is about what someone said or what they did, or too much information, okay? Remember how we talk about papers. We've been doing this all semester. It's built from evidence, primarily, okay? And then analyzing that evidence, digging into details, whether it's a quotation or something else, getting specific, right? And talking to me about an argument. 75% of your paragraph, if not more, is going to be those two things, okay? The rest of it is going to be topic sentence, and then whatever, like, what 10% you have left maybe is your context, is your information. That's about how much you can have. If you have any more than that, you need to trim it. If you have way more than that, you might need to rewrite the paragraph, okay? Number 4. Any details they might dig into, especially when it comes to their evidence. Have they glossed over anything worth further consideration? This is basically missed opportunities. This can happen sometimes in this paper where, you know, maybe the student already has an argument in mind and they're just kind of talking around the evidence. We've done that a couple times in class. Another idea would be, especially with quotations, if you remember how we talk about them, do they have a quotation and they don't really work with it like we've been trying to do? Specifically digging into some of the language, thinking about not just the idea behind the quotation, but the phrasing. If they're not doing that, you take a swing. This is what I mean by missed opportunities. Do you see something you're like, hey man, I understand part of what you're getting at in your analysis, but this guy used this word or this phrase. Like, have you considered how that might alter your argument a little bit, right? This sort of thing. That's the idea with the peer review. And again, you do it for your partner, which is just nice. But also, if I was in your position at some point in my process, I would do it on my own paper. I would take these questions and kind of have my draft up and go back and forth. I think it could be beneficial. Okay. The conversation I want to have. More of you are here than I was worried would be here, but it's still a little spare. I have to frame this very carefully. I'll say it like this. I have pretty strong assumptions about what your response to what I'm going to ask you is going to be. Okay? Now, once you have that response, I actually want you to think about it. Sometimes your initial response is not actually how you feel. Okay? The other thing I want you to know, don't respond out loud. We're going to do a thing in a second. This is all weird, I understand that, but just go with it. What I'm thinking is, due to somewhat lacking attendance, better than I anticipated, so I appreciate it, but somewhat lacking attendance, and I imagine, at least for some of you, waning enthusiasm due to whatever you may or may not have gotten into last night. Here's what I'm wondering. All the work I just outlined for you, you can do outside of this room. What I'm proposing, and this is the thing, you're going to have a reaction, but then I want you to actually think about it. What I'm proposing is we leave this room. Separately. We're not going anywhere together. Okay, we're not taking a field trip. Let's have class outside. No, we're not doing that, okay? Again, I imagine I know pretty well what your response is going to be. Which is like, whee! Like, okay, but here's what I'm going to ask. We're going to have a blind vote. Because I want people to give me their actual opinion. And not everyone will agree with everyone. And I don't want anyone to feel like pushed around or anything like that. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you can like maybe close your eyes here in a second, we're going to take a vote. Okay? I know this is a little bit elementary school. I do apologize. But I'm going to say something after it as well. So I'm going to ask, if you'll close your eyes, just show of hands. Who would like to leave in probably about 5 minutes? Okay, you can put your hands down. That was damn near all of you. That wasn't everybody, which again, Especially those of you who raise your hands, you're like, how? I mean, it's not everybody. So here's what I'm going to say before I let you go. What's up?
Can we open our eyes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I was sitting here.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
With your eyes open.
I appreciate that. That's my bad. When it comes to me letting you go here in a second, do whatever you're going to do, which for some of you might just be go back to bed. That's fine. It's that kind of day, you know. But at some point, you have some time, again, to use here. I still think you should do the peer review. I honestly do. I think it helps. Not just your partner, but it helps you when it comes to kind of like putting you in a good mindset. What I would do if I had time to set aside, I would do the peer review for somebody. And I might take a 5-minute break, and then I would immediately go and do the same thing to mine and like use the peer review as a warm-up. That's what I would do, personally. Whatever you want to do, it's kind of up to you here. I'm gonna let you go in a minute, okay? I wanna remind you, our final draft is due before we meet again, I believe. Like the midnight before business, you get it. Turnitin.com, same as always. So make that dream happen. Please remember, MLA matters, works cited matters. It's only worth a couple points, but it's still, some of you are losing a couple points here and there on like MLA stuff. Double check the prompt. Sometimes your papers are short for no real damn reason, right? Like, check these things. Take 10 minutes and check that stuff. Get yourself those points. Otherwise, the stuff on the peer review I do think should help, for the most part, guide you. Put some guardrails up, essentially, okay? When we come back on Wednesday, it will not be Halloween anymore. We'll be in the final stretch. We have a project we're going to talk about, and I know some people freak out about that word. It's meant to be a victory lap, okay? It's meant to be not a big deal. And I will cover why it's not a big deal next time, but just know this last paper is the big deal. This is something that you want to spend time on, and that's the idea. Lastly, especially if you didn't raise your hand there a minute ago, stick around for a minute after. We can talk about your paper, we can talk about whatever, that's all good too, okay? And before I let you all go, because as soon as I say that, you're gonna like, does anybody have any questions about the paper that you'd like to ask just here and now? Yeah.
For the works cited, are we basically just gonna stick on the annotated bibliographies that we did?
Oh, no, okay. Yeah. So, works cited, and another good website to check always. It's helpful, man. A works cited looks like this. All right, and I need to think of an author. Rick. Entries look like this. I made this up, I think. Author, last name, first name. They need to be alphabetized. I figure Frank will be pretty close to the top in this made-up example. It also has what's called hanging indent, so it's the inverse of a body paragraph. Body paragraph, you indent the first line and nothing else. Works cited entries, you do not indent the first line, and every other line in that entry you indent. The reason you do that is because when you get to like entry number 2, it's going to start back at the margin, and that tells me it's another entry, okay? The other thing I would say about that, if you go to, I believe we talked about this a little bit already, could be wrong. If you use a website like easybib.com or whatever bib generator you're comfortable with, it will mostly get this right. Not 100% usually, but mostly get it right. What I would then do is check your entries against the OWL at Purdue to make sure they're right. But that's what your works cited page should look like. Does that answer your question?
So you don't put the link to the website?
Oh, that's one of those goofy. Yeah, I think technically it's still like at my discretion, which is such a dumb, I don't care. You can give me a link, you cannot. Like, I mean, it's not required,
Like the
technically.
Google Doc thing, where you can like, do it, like, it puts it in for you, it puts the link with it. Could you just like, put the link?
Oh, when you make a works cited on Google Docs? Okay, yeah, I mean, that's fine. But I mean, if you don't have it, I'm not gonna worry either. Other questions?
Will we be able to have revisions for this paper?
What happened?
Will we be able to have revisions for this paper?
Not for the last paper. Sorry. I wasn't ready for that face. Well, because it's the last paper. It's the last paper. There's no time. By the time I get them graded, we won't see each other anymore, basically. So there wouldn't be time. I will say, to calm your nerves a little bit, most professors, me included, take that into account when grading your last paper. If you take my meeting.
Yeah.
Huh?
Just kidding.
I'm saying I'm a little nicer about it.
Ball.
Other questions? Okay. If you have any other questions you want to ask in the privacy of people not being here, that's totally fine. Stick around for a second. Otherwise, I'll see you on Wednesday. Go get some rest perhaps, but then get some work done. Thank you.